Stand strong, Mark Alford. Give me a sign, baby. Get me a T-shirt. Give me something to work with. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Glad you're here on KCMO Talk Radio. Mark Alford, one of our Missouri congressmen, of course, he spent 30 years on television here in Kansas City. He had more people at his coffee event that he does on Monday mornings yesterday than he probably has had in the last 3 years combined. We were texting yesterday. He gets, usually 10 people show up to his Monday morning coffee event down there in Belton at his office headquarters. He had about 300 people out there yesterday. Why? Well, they're mad at Elon Musk. They are mad at the audacity of somebody actually going through the federal government and saying, you know what? We've got plenty of waste. We've got plenty of fraud. We've got plenty of abuse that we need to make sure gets figured out. This is something that I would think most Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, would admit is a problem, right? And would understand, hey, we should do something about it. But no, this is what you're seeing in town halls around the country now. And it's all fabricated, let's be very clear. It's all fabricated and intended to create an environment that makes some of these members of Congress a little spooked out. Right? If 300 people show up at your town hall when normally there's 10, you're going to be like, oh, no, what am I doing? I don't want to lose my job. This is bad. What am I going to do? Now, I'm not worried about that for Mark Alford. I'm not. But I'm just telling you that's the purpose of all this. That's why these things are being carefully coordinated and they're being carefully organized because the data doesn't back it up. I mean, there was a Harvard-Harris poll that dropped yesterday, right towards the end of the show. And it showed, this is an amazing stat that you're not going to see on CNN, MSNBC. I don't even know if Fox has aired it. I'm not sure. But this Harvard-Harris poll showed that 76% of Americans support Donald Trump's undertaking of a full-scale effort to find and eliminate fraud and waste in government expenditures. That is a 76-24 issue right now. It's a 63-37 issue on this question, freezing and reevaluating all foreign aid expenditures and the department that handled them. 63% support that in this Harvard-Harris poll. It's not like it's Joe's poll, by the way. It's a legitimate polling outlet, Harris, and of course Harvard is Harvard. They're also not organizations looking to do this administration any favors. So I know sometimes when 300 people show up at Mark Alford's town hall in Belton yesterday, it's like, oh my gosh, we're on the wrong side here. No, you're not. I'll do my Biden whisper. No, man, you're not, man.
Come on, man.
I'm just saying. So this is what it sounded like outside of Mark Alford's office yesterday. Got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho.
Elon Musk has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go. John's dancing in there. I wish I had the camera on him. Oh, my gosh. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go. Got a decent ring and rhyme to it, I guess. I like the lady at the end. Coward! Coward! Take down the man! Is this what the 60s were like, John? Give or take, more or less?
Well, I was going to say the hey, hey, ho, ho is now in public domain. It's so old.
Yeah, I know.
I'm wondering how many of these people are actually Mark Alford's constituents or if they came down from the north.
Well, I think there's a lot of that going on. I told you yesterday how a buddy of mine in Georgia, Eric Erickson, was sharing over the weekend how these broke out at one of his local congressman's town halls. And the staffers said that most of these people were not in the district, are not from the district. Some were, but a lot of them came from other districts to protest the Republican, to try to scare the Republican. I'm sure, and I will ask Mark Alford, he's going to be on the show later this morning at about 8:50 after Tirade Tuesday. So I will ask him does his staff know how many of these people were actually constituents? And frankly, not that it matters. Mark won by like 50 points in his last election, okay? He's not at risk of losing his job. But here's the thing. Even if he was, I would say keep going. Full steam ahead. Do not back off. You've got one chance right now with this country sitting at $36 trillion in debt, running $2 trillion annual deficits, making more revenue, so it's not a revenue problem. You hear about like, oh, just tax the rich or whatever. We are setting records for revenue in this country. There are not enough billionaires to make up a $2 trillion annual deficit and pay down $36 trillion in debt. That's all just feel-good stuff that doesn't actually solve the problem. You've got one chance right now to try to course correct the country and the history of this country, and you've got to take advantage of this moment, no ifs, ands, or buts, even if it costs some of you your jobs. You have to do it for the good of the country, John.
Yeah, and the protesters, from the footage I saw, there was a striking similarity to all of them. Not a lot of diversity in that crowd.
That's a good point as well.
Right?
Yes. Kind of looked like a washed-up hippie crowd in some cases.
Well, that and other things.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment and characterization. You know, I mean, because most people in the private sector are just showing up to work, have to show up to work, bust their tails working hard. I mean, I saw a lot of gray, whatever. That's fine. I understand that people who are retired have a little more time on their hands. But it's not like they're, the government workers who might be getting laid off. It's not like the 116 IRS workers here in Kansas City showed up yesterday, from what I could tell. And don't forget how all this began, or a lot of the hysteria began last week, when there were reports of over 1,000 IRS workers in this town getting let go. The number was 116. There are 30,000 federal workers in Kansas City. So what are we talking about? Less than 1% thus far of the federal workforce in Kansas City? Less than 1%. That is absolutely nothing. 913-408-7957. It's our studio line and our text line. Mark's up in Liberty. Good morning, Mark. What's going on, man?
Good morning. I agree 1,000%. Additionally, I think these people were probably paid to protest, find out where their money source is, cut them off.
Yeah, I don't know about the money thing, obviously. I mean, if we hear anything on that front, we'll let you know. But, hey, if it's organizations paying for protesters, that's been going on forever, man. Nothing to do about that, right? They're entitled to, if they want to make a buck protesting something, whatever. They can do it. But
that's fine. It just highlights how disingenuous they are.
Yes, if that's what's going on.
May I add a point?
Sure.
With regards to trying to verify the legitimacy of some of the federal workforce, they mentioned last night how they suspected that there were a lot of federal positions that were phantom positions, that these people are not even answering their emails. They don't even really exist. This is another avenue for rooting out fraud and laundering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did see that yesterday, I guess it would have been, that this is really just a way to figure out who actually has a job, right? Who's actually doing a job and like reading emails and doing some semblance of work on behalf of the federal government. I did see that. I would say that I think a little bit of this has been clunky on the rollout from Elon. I will say that much. Do I think the broader point is still one that needs to be hammered home, which is that we have waste, fraud, and abuse and need a slimmed down federal government? Absolutely. Do I think this whole email thing has been clunky? Yep. I think both of those things are true at the same time. And what you want to have is clarity. I mean, if you've been part of any layoff, clarity is important, right? Having people understand we're making this move, here's why, who's going, here's the timeline. All those things matter, and all those things do make a difference. And if we're going to bring the private sector into the public sector, which we need, well, let's bring the private sector smarts in terms of how we lay people off to the forefront as well. And that, at least the last couple of days, feels like it's been missing with all this email craziness. 913-408-7957. You may have missed this last night. You're part of the early bird gets the worm crowd here at 6:14 in the morning. But I don't know if I've ever seen something like this play out on television. And that is somebody basically calling their employer a racist to the world. This was shocking stuff. And I'll share it and get to more with you coming up on 95.7 FM KCMO. You spend enough time in this world, you see a lot of crazy stuff. Heck, we obviously have to say goodbye to Dan Bongino coming up here in a few weeks on KCMO as he gets set to head and work for the FBI. So you spend enough time in media, and I haven't spent forever in media, but, long enough to get a feel for it on the sports side, the news side, and see how people act behind the scenes, on the camera, behind the microphone, everything else. But I don't think I've ever seen what we saw last night on MSNBC. With Joy Reid getting shown the door, her colleague and the biggest star at MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. I know that you weren't maybe tuned in last night, and don't worry, I wasn't either. It's not like my secret fetish to watch Rachel Maddow. I promise you that's not a thing in my house. No, it's not, Mark. Stop claiming that it is, okay?
Hey, I know. There's some good Big 12 basketball on last night.
There was. You're right. I was flipping around and watched some of that Texas Tech-Houston game. Mahomes was there. Did you see Mahomes on the sidelines for the game last night?
Yeah, with the fresh cut.
He looked good. I like that with the tight sides. He's taking after me with that cut. I like it. He looks good. Get rid of those grays before they come in, man. These kids will do it to you fast. But Rachel Maddow, when closing out her show and talking about Joy Reid, who got let go from the network yesterday, hosted her final show, we'll tell you why here in a second, claimed that MSNBC, the most liberal network on cable news, did this in part because of Joy Reid's race. I kid you not. Here we go. Here's Rachel Maddow.
An even bigger programming change is at 7 p.m., 7 p.m. Eastern, where Joy Reid's show, The Readout, ended tonight. And Joy is not taking a different job in the network. She is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it.
Rachel Maddow last night, the definition of a circular firing squad. Now, I'll say this much. I agree it was a bad mistake to let Joy Reid walk out the door. They should have carried her out of the building and ran. And they should have done that a long time ago. There might be more to learn from Joy Reid. That's true. Like how to not do a television show every night on cable news. What not to say. How not to bring race into literally every conversation that you seemingly have on the network. There is more to learn from that perspective. Maybe not in the way that, Rachel Maddow had in mind. But here are the facts. The facts are that Joy Reid has seen a massive decline in her show's viewership. In fact, the numbers are 53% reduction in post-election viewership for Joy Reid's show. But this didn't happen just in a vacuum of the last month and a half or so, 2 months. No, this has been going on for a long time. Joy Reid has taken pot shots at groups all over the country. Those have been her most viral clips. Like this, when she was talking about Latino men after the election, and it was one of the most obscene comments that you would ever hear on cable news.
Deportations happen. Y'all voted with Stephen Miller and David Duke and against your own sisters and chose Kamala Harris with 60% of their votes. So you own everything that happens to your mixed status families and to your wives, sisters, and abuelas from here on in.
If anybody else had said something that bizarre, that racist about a group of people, like she said about Latino men, they wouldn't have made it to the next night. And deep down, I believe MSNBC knew that. They had a problem on their hands. And they gave this thing years. This show started back in July of 2020 when she replaced Chris Matthews. You remember that. And we all know where the world was back in July of 2020, right? Well, now, fast forward almost 5 years, and Joy Reid has continued to see a decline in the ratings. And that's ultimately what this business will come down to. Unless you're going to be a great team player and you're going to bring something else to the table, if your viewership numbers aren't there, well, guess what, John? You've been around long enough. It's not going to work out well for you.
I do not subscribe to I hate to see anyone lose their job here. I'm a hater. I own it. Bye-bye, Joy. Is it any different than the ride with Alex Jones and some of this stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You know?
I think that's a good comparison and
analogy.
analogy.
They're both extremes on different sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, I'm not going to miss her and let the door hit you in the butt on the way out.
I'm fine with that, man.
I'm getting pissed now.
Although Jones isn't digging that commentary against him there, John. But to your point there, here's the other problem. This is bad when you look at it through the prism of anybody of color being in that chair, whether it's at MSNBC, CNN, Fox News Nation, anywhere. Radio, TV, podcasting, doesn't matter. If you claim that Joy Reid just lost her job like Rachel Maddow did, in part, wink, wink, nod, nod, as she says at the end there because of her skin color, well, that is a disservice. It's a disservice to anybody of color who happens to find themselves in a prominent position in media. Because they still have their jobs because they're good at what they do, theoretically. If you just say Joy Reid was not doing the job that we expected her to do, well, guess what? Then it's not about race. Because this is not about race. This is about somebody who did not perform at the level that MSNBC was expecting, and the headaches were not worth the ratings. That's oftentimes a big part of the equation as well. There are people whose ratings and revenues are worth the headache. You've seen it in local radio, national radio, local TV, national TV. Joy Reid's ratings were not worth the headaches. That's a big part of the driver here, too. And if MSNBC and its biggest stars like Rachel Maddow are now calling basically the network that employs her racist, man, that is a circular firing squad if I have ever seen. And I guess a part of me, to John's point, is kind of here for it.
I was going to say pay-per-view. I'm up. Sign me up.
I got enough subscriptions, but I may have room for one more. Oh, my goodness. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio right after the news in 2 minutes, what was the big protest about at Olathe North yesterday? Well, it ties into the immigration issue, and we'll give you the details coming up next. So you're a parent. You get notified yesterday by the school that your kid was protesting in downtown Olathe because of ICE raids. What do you do when they come home? I mean, my kids are all younger. They're 6'3" and 1 next week. So I'm not dealing with this nonsense yet. I'll just tell you what. If I get the email from my school that Claire wasn't at school today, oh, what happened? Where was she? She got on the bus. Oh, she was down protesting in front of the courthouse in downtown Olathe because ICE raids. We got a problem when she comes home. I'll just say that much.
She needs some new friends.
Yeah.
Probably drove her there.
Yep. Homeschooling's right around the corner, honey. That's what we would be talking about. So this is what happened yesterday. Olathe North had about somewhere between 30 and 50 kids walk out of school and go downtown to the Johnson County Courthouse. You could walk there from Olathe North and protest ICE raids, which, by the way, guys, this is so 2 weeks ago now. Come on. Where were you when this was top story? It's all about DOGE this week. Let's go.
It was too cold.
Yeah, that's a good point. They had to wait for it to warm up, I guess, to do their protest properly. Oh, man, that's funny. That's a very good
Only
point,
had
too.
2 days of school in the last 3 weeks.
Yep, you know what? You're right about that. I tried to forget about it, but you're right. They're back in school now, so they've been planning this protest and this rally for probably the better part of a month. They finally had a good day to go do it. It was 55, 60 degrees and sunny yesterday. My goodness. So here's what it sounded like. KCTV5 had the report.
30 students in Olathe were not in class today. Instead, they were protesting outside City Hall. They're condemning the ongoing ICE raids. These students say they fear for their families every day.
Literally on the point of losing my own father, and honestly, it's like I don't know how people can just sit here and watch and just not do anything about it.
I'm literally at the point of almost losing my own father. If your father is here illegally, if God forbid he is somebody who has committed a crime while being here illegally, I don't know if I'd be running to television to broadcast that, right? Like if you're someone who is legitimately concerned about the fact that you have someone in your family who may have committed a crime and that person may be a target of ICE to be arrested and deported, I'm pretty sure going on television to talk about that is not the best way to make sure that nobody finds that family member. Call me crazy, but I'm not sure that's the play that you want to be going for here.
So that's why we want to spread awareness to this. It breaks.
We want to spread awareness to this because my dad might get deported?
My heart knowing that could be me. That could be me any second.
Wait. That could be me any second, says a high school student. First off, you and I both know if they were arresting people, dragging them out of schools and deporting them, that would be leading the national news every single night. They would forget the name Elon Musk in a heartbeat if kids were getting dragged out of school by ICE and getting deported. That has not been happening based on reporting anywhere in the country. So my other question would be, why is KCTV5 putting people who do not know what they're talking about on television? But I guess, they got to go down there. They got to get a soundbite from a protester or two. And these are the Mensa members that they stumbled upon.
Just waking up in the morning and praying that nothing will happen to my own parents because they've been through a lot.
Olathe Schools shared a statement with us saying, quoting here, "Our schools follow our standard attendance protocols, and if a student is not in attendance, notification is sent to parents or guardians. In Olathe Public Schools, we value our students' perspectives and encourage our students to use their voice."
Now get your butts back in the classroom, okay? That's how that should have ended there, John.
Yeah, in-school suspension.
Yeah, I mean, that's what should be happening, no? I remember that as a kid.
No, impress me. Do it on your own time.
Yeah.
Do it on one of those days
Yeah.
off. March
Yeah.
your butt on down to the courthouse.
Hey, we got off today because of the cold. You know what? We're going to go downtown.
We're going to draw awareness to this.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
That would give me some impression. High school students walk out. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Established 1955 Blackboard Jungle.
I would have much more respect if they had done that during a day off last week. Instead, this is what you get. And what's amazing, too, is I'm watching the video outside of the Johnson County Courthouse in downtown Olathe yesterday, and they're waving Mexican flags. It doesn't make any sense. I say this as someone who just wants to see your protests actually make sense. All right, I'm saying this as someone who is concerned about how your protest looks. Not because I agree with you, but because I want to at least help your optics here on your protest. Because I'm that kind of a guy, okay? Whether you like me or not.
Such a nice man.
Okay, fine, I'll take it. But that is a prime example of how your protest makes no sense. Waving a Mexican flag in front of the Johnson County Courthouse while saying, "We will not stand for deportations by ICE." Wouldn't you wave the American flag? If you're saying, this is where we want to be, this is the place we're proud of, this is our home, wave our flag. If you wave the Mexican flag while then saying we're not going back, what kind of message does that send?
Exactly.
There is no message that makes any kind of sense if you're waving a Mexican flag at an ICE raid protest saying, don't send me back there, then why do you have their flag? It doesn't make any sense. And that's what I'm trying to figure out here. But, there's not a lot of sense to be knocked into some of these people, unfortunately, or for better or for worse. On the text line, 913-408-7957. Pete, they were protesting the woke education that was being shoved down their throats. No, they're not. No, you're wrong on the text line. Trust me, that is not what's happening here. You had 30 people. You heard the commentary, and that's not what they were protesting by any stretch of the imagination. On the text line, Pete, we need 5 bullet points from their teachers on what they did last week. That I like. That is well done. And 5 bullet points from the students on what they did. Well, I guess they were out most of last week. But either way, that's excellent on the text line. That's fantastic. Call 1-800-PETE for protest management. Gosh, you guys are on fire. That is very well done. 913-408-7957 is our studio line and our text line. I guarantee you we're going to have other protests like this in other area high schools in the days ahead. Because someone's going to see that from Olathe North, and they're going to say, that's a great idea. Let's do that at, Shawnee Mission North, Lee Summit. I guarantee you that is coming. And I'm also very underwhelmed by Olathe's response, but I'll save that for later in the morning. Don't fall for it. 7:05. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Another beautiful day ahead in Kansas City. Do not fall for it. If you are Mark Alford, if you are Derek Schmidt, if you are Sam Graves, those are some of the area Republican members of Congress. There is a push right now to try to get you to back down and continue to push against Elon Musk and DOGE. But the polling does not back up your opponents. Even if they have 300 people at a town hall in Belton, like what Mark Alford was dealing with yesterday. And he will be on the show later in the 8 o'clock hour at 8:50 to react to that. He's now back in D.C., but he did his coffee with Mark yesterday, and he usually has 10 people there. He had 300 people there chanting about Elon Musk. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Elon Musk has got to go. Very creative. D+ for creativity. But, I guess I wouldn't expect anything less. So this came out yesterday late in the morning, and it was a Harvard-Harris poll, and it had a lot of what Donald Trump is doing and trying to do with DOGE and some of the other policies as well. And right now, this Harvard-Harris poll, which is a legitimate polling outlet, it's not like, Bob's poll. It's a real polling outlet. And it showed here that Donald Trump's efforts to undertake a full-scale elimination of fraud and waste in government expenditures is supported by 76% of Americans. Only 24% oppose it. How about this? Freezing and reevaluating all foreign aid expenditures and the department that handled them. 63% support, 37% do not. Cutting government expenditures that were already allocated by Congress. 59% support, 41% oppose. If you are in a bubble driven by MSNBC or CNN, you might think this is the worst thing ever and the American people are turning on Donald Trump. Or like James Carville said yesterday, or said over the weekend, Trump's collapse is imminent because of DOGE.
And so, Dan, this is what I believe. I believe that this administration, in less than 30 days, in the midst of a massive collapse, and particularly a collapse in public opinion. Della Volpe at Harvard, who's very good. I used to think, once I saw a Harvard youth poll, I discounted it. I've come to say it's a pretty damn good poll. Pretty good guy. He's gone from 53 approval to under 30 to 39. That's a collapse.
Okay, so James Carville, and this is what you've seen, a very common theme in legacy media, that Donald Trump's numbers are collapsing, he is collapsing, but there's nothing outside of their own opinions to back that up right now. Has there been a little softening of the approval? I suppose a hair, but this Harvard-Harris poll that came out yesterday had Trump over 50% on the approval numbers. And his policies are more popular than him. And that's that's been par for the course for Trump, going back to his first time in office. His policies are typically more popular than he is as an individual. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Overwhelmingly, the American people are saying, spend my tax dollars better. Spend my tax dollars more efficiently. If there's any corruption, if there's fraud going on, I want to know about it. And that's what they're doing right now. That's what's happening right now. And that's why, whether it's rallies and protests down at Mark Alford's office yesterday or anywhere else in the country, it's all meant to intimidate. It's all meant to create a perception that the American people are turning on Trump, turning on these policies, and turning on DOGE, when that's not what is actually happening here. It's not backed up by polling that was done just in the last few days. This poll from Harvard-Harris was conducted February 19th and 20th. I mean, that's less than a week ago at this point. But then what happens? Media gets to run these stories nationally and also locally. Oh, man, people are fed up. The tide is turning. No, it's not. It's not turning. These are the things that have to start happening in our federal government to get this $2 trillion deficit and $36 trillion in debt under control. People will lose their jobs. I'm sorry, it stinks. It's really too bad. But guess what? It has to happen to save the country financially. Starbucks let go 1,000 people yesterday. Did you see any panels on CNN about how awful that is for the 1,000 Starbucks employees? Has anyone gone around local Kansas City media and tried to find if there were any layoffs in Kansas City area Starbucks? I mean, heck, they had every reporter in town outside of the IRS building for 116 people losing their jobs. They acted like Kansas City was going to collapse as a community with these layoffs. They didn't do that. They haven't found any Starbucks employees who got let go. Ask yourself why.
On today's assignment desk.
I highly doubt it. They're going to spend more time outside of Olathe North, about 30 kids protesting ICE, than they are in the Starbucks deal. Because it's all about the broader picture here. They know that if government gets leaner, if government gets more efficient, if government has fewer employees, it's not great for their party's prospects going forward. It's not. It's also why you look at the last 4 years, the jobs numbers always looked better than they actually were. The government, every single month for the last couple of years, was a top 3 employer. And then we would sit there and say, wow, these jobs numbers came in great. And then when you actually looked at the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who was a top 3 employer almost every single month? The government. Like clockwork, the government was there to hire people, and it was never sustainable because the government operates on other people's money. The government cannot exist without a robust private sector. And even though we've set records for revenues to the feds the last few years, which we were told was impossible to happen after Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts, actually the government took in more money than it's ever taken in after the tax cuts. Go try to figure out that one. We still ran up $2 trillion deficits. So now the cutting and the slicing and dicing, thank goodness, is happening. They can't let up. This cannot be just one of these dog and pony shows where Trump says he tried and didn't do anything. And I don't think that's what's going to happen here. I'm just saying they have got to go full steam ahead on this. And I don't think that Mark Alford or any Republicans, for that matter, are going to be intimidated by these, I think, partially made up protests that are meant to change the narrative across media and then across the country as well. But some people might get a little weak-kneed, and I hope that they don't. Here's what it sounded like yesterday at Mark Alford's office. I'm not going to play the ho-ho, hey, ho-ho, Elon Musk has got to go. I'll do that later in the morning. But this is constituents yelling at him yesterday. Mark earned his paycheck yesterday.
Elon Musk has contracts with the federal government. But he is also, I think, doing an effective job.
Conflict of interest! Show me!
There are a lot of people who don't want to see waste, abuse, and fraud weeded out. Some of them here today.
I don't want him in charge of it.
But he is
always fraud and abuse.
Chief executive who can appoint whoever he can appoint you.
I thought it was your job. It is your job.
Elon Musk and the president have agreed.
That's what it sounds like at my house between about 4 and 5 in the afternoon. Just a lot of noise, a lot of female voices yelling. That's basically my home the hour before dinner. Toddlers screaming, which is more or less what Mark had to deal with yesterday. Toddlers screaming, Elon stinks. Elon's the worst. Oh, my gosh, Elon, he is fraud and abuse. Mark was laughing at that one. He got a kick out of that. So Mark stood tall. I mean, as tall as Mark can stand, I guess. But, he stood tall.
I can imagine what it'd be like at their house. How can you watch the news when you're always talking to them? Yeah. You're never going to learn anything.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? Well, that's something where it's like, you know what? And Mark had a great approach. He had a great attitude. We were texting about it yesterday, and he seemed to be as jovial as ever. Because deep down, Mark is actually one of the guys that you would want to have being the messenger for this, because his media background is actually going to serve him well in situations like this. And I think that's going to be very apparent in the Kansas City media market in the weeks and the months ahead, because they're going to try to go to Mark for some gotcha journalism, and he's not going to fall for it. I got to defend our man Dan Bongino. Not that he needs me to defend him. He certainly has plenty of ability to do just that. But yesterday, of course, it was announced. Well, this was announced on Sunday when my phone started just exploding, that Bongino is going to be leaving his radio show, which airs here 11 to 2 every weekday on KCMO after Kevin Keatsman, to become the deputy director at the FBI. And beyond the outrage that has ensued in media over Dan Bongino becoming the deputy director of the FBI, which tells you a lot about, the people in charge and what they might be concerned about. It's not really about well-being of the country. It's that they don't want Dan doing things that would be considered, not in the purview of a traditional deputy director of the FBI. That's what it's largely about. But Dan was, listen, I know that Dan's not going to be surprised by any of this. But as a fellow KCMO guy, I feel compelled to spend at least a couple of minutes defending him here when CNN is just trashing him last night. They brought the human chode onto the set, Brian Stelter. I did that for you, Mark. I mean, every time.
It makes me laugh every time.
It's like clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
Mark knows what I'm saying, and you should see the guy's face in there. He starts, bending over, belly laughing. When I call Stelter over at CNN the human chode, it's the perfect description for the guy, is it not? If there's ever been a human chode on TV, it's Brian Stelter.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
So way more accurate than anything he said last night about Dan Bongino.
Dan Bongino used to be a Secret Service agent. Then he transitioned into this media job. He actually ran for Congress 3 times and failed. So he went down this really profitable route of being a right-wing bomb-throwing host. He was on Fox News for a while, then he left Fox, and now he's at Cumulus Radio, hosting a daily podcast. He hawks gold on the show, he promotes conspiracy theories, he calls liberals evil, and back in 2020, he played a key role in promoting Trump's big election lies. So this is not someone who's, just out there, gently promoting the Trump agenda. No, he is an incendiary figure, someone, as the New York Times said, a misinformation super spreader. And that makes you think about, as he comes into the FBI, how will he perform? What reality will he acknowledge? What reality will he recognize in this job?
Well, hopefully whatever reality he recognizes is not whatever reality CNN recognizes, because we know those two things are in no way the same. But my goodness, Dan Bongino, nothing but a right-wing bomb thrower, misinformation super spreader. I haven't heard the word super spreader in quite some time. I was like, man, that one's been outside of the vocabulary for a little bit. So now he's a misinformation super spreader, and he hawks gold as well. I guess that's something that should make him unqualified for the job, talking about why he sees value in buying gold. We are $36 trillion in debt. I think that is case in point for why gold may hold some value right now. And gold has been skyrocketing if you're following the markets at all. Gold's been doing great. So if you listen to Dan on the gold a while back, you might be doing pretty well right now sitting on it. Stelter, he's not someone gently promoting the agenda. He's a misinformation super spreader. I mean, gosh, it is just so tiresome, is it not? Now listen to Dan. I listen to Dan. Agree on a lot, disagree on some things. There's a novel concept. I mean, you listen to me. You agree on a lot, maybe. You disagree on a lot. I don't know. But guess what? We have conversations here. You can call in any time. You can give your 2 cents, give your piece, and we can go back and forth. That's the beauty of this platform. That's the beauty of shows like this. And that's why it remains so incredibly powerful. And you heard Dan say yesterday on his show, and I thought it was genuine when he talked about how much he is going to miss the radio audience. You can't duplicate it on the podcast. I'm sorry, you can't. And I listen to podcasts just like many of you do. You cannot duplicate the real-time nature of a live radio show with a podcast where you've got texts and calls and social media bits coming in real time. Things are happening in real time. There's no editing. There's no cutting out. There's only Mark hitting the dump button on someone when he needs to. And Mark's always got his finger just a couple inches away from that dump button. He's right on it, man. But you can't duplicate that. And I think Dan came to appreciate that as a guy who went podcast to radio. When you're seeing more of that happening, it seems like, in media every single day. But it's a very different beast. And Dan learned that, and he did a great job of it over the last, nearly 4 years that he's been doing the show. And trust me, once we figure out what's next, you'll know right here on 95.7 FM.